Hello, welcome to the January 19th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that I may get behind with a number of questions, but we will go through the questions chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if you could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would just kind of speed up the whole process so we get through more questions in the live stream. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase, whether it's version 11, 12, or 13, or which level, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information would be helpful, as well as the operating system, so if you're running Mac OS or Windows. We should have an index of all of the topics discussed that will be pinned to the top of the comments field with the timestamp, so you can quickly navigate to different topics. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, I think we're over 30,000 topics, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. I also do have a PDF document that if you wanted to use as a reference to search, if you email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'm happy to share that as well. When asking, so we also want to give special thanks to two other people that serve as moderators, to Agent K and Jazz Dude, and we'll give Jazz Dude another special thanks for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. in a snowy Alexandria, Virginia. We have a couple inches of snow, so you may hear my son kind of running above my office as he's going in and out of playing with snow, so I'll apologize for any sounds you may hear in the background. And just one other, and if you're attending the live stream, if you're watching it live or just watching it afterward, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. One quick note, I will be at the NAMM show for the next week and a half, so we won't have live streams next week or the following Tuesday. We will resume on February 2nd, so just a quick note with that. So with that, let's go ahead and start our live stream. All right, so we see Peter from Montreal wishing everyone a happy Friday. All right, and we see Stefan checking in from Sweden. We have Larry B just asking everyone how cold it is where he's at. It's 14 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 10 Celsius in Brampton, Ontario. All right, so we have Vincent checking in. We have Uno Memento just checking in from Finland. We see Aluel from Switzerland. We see Cubase Index from Stockholm. Thanks for joining us, Jan. Martin from a frozen Germany. Uno Memento. We see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we see Jim Barclay also from Texas. All right, so we see question. Hello, Greg. I wonder about the remote control editor smart switches. Is there a way to make my VPOTs when being pressed assigned as smart switches in the Midi Remote control editor? All right, so let's go ahead and just take a look. So I think as long as it's kind of transmitting, I don't think I really have a MIDI controller that does that, but let's go ahead and set up kind of a fake control here real quick. All right, and we'll just see if we can create a MIDI control. So I'll blow this up so we can see it a little easier. All right, so I think if it's where you could set it up for like a push encoder. So let's say, and I don't have anything MIDI-wise hooked up. So I think if you set it up right here as a push controller, let me just... I'll come here to my Nectar. So let's set it up. All right, so push encoder. Let's see if I could get this going. So I think what you would need, I think if you set it up, it's not accepting my MIDI input from my controller right now, but try setting it up as a push encoder, and then I think you could have one value when it's pressed down and one value when it is not pushed down. So let's just see if I could add one here quickly. But yeah, try setting it up as just when you build the object, try setting it up as a push controller, and I think that will allow you to kind of have I'm not sure if it will allow you to kind of transmit the two different MIDI values at once. So, but try setting up as a push control in the Midi Remote. All right, so we see from Dski, hi Greg, can I have just one plugin open at the time? So the open plugin closes when another one opens. I'm getting crazy with all the plugins open. So I don't think that there's a plugin, like one plugin exclusive mode. So, you know, I think by default it will... So we could have it automatically open. There is a keyboard shortcut to close all plugin windows. So if you want to come over here, let's just set my untitled page here. And if you set up, you know, a remote function, so let's say we go to our key commands, to Windows, but there's a show hide plugins. So let's say if I have this, I'll apply the mapping for this particular knob. So if you get overwhelmed with plugins, and used to be that, you know, some programs would only have one plugin open and then you couldn't, you know, you could only see one plugin at a time, which was a bit annoying for a lot of customers. But let's come over here. So let's say if I have an insert open, a couple of inserts, so what I could do now is just hit that button and that will open and close all the plugin inserts. So if I come and say now I add a new plugin, that plugin we can see all the plugins, or just see, or have a key command or a remote control function to hide the plugins. But I don't know of a function that would automatically close the plugin, other plugins while one plugin is open, but there is a key command to close all plugins. All right, so we have Masta LBC, just wishing everyone fun. All right, and we have Benny checking in from cold Sweden. All right, Jim Barclay asks, is there plans to add more quick connects in the future? I'm on Cubase 12 LE, which only has 8. So a lot of times, the quick controls are, a lot of times what we could do is when we have quick controls, these will be set up to control kind of the 8 relevant parameters. So if they're set up for focus quick controls, they can change depending upon different functions. Excuse me. So if I want to control the parameters of, let's say, this particular plugin, so once we have this set, they will kind of dynamically change. So if I have the plugin, I could set kind of my quick control values here, and we could see or reassign the quick control values. But with the focus quick control, if I now have the track selected, we can look at our track quick controls. So as we come over here, we could say, let's open up some of our quick control presets. So let's say if I wanted like volume and linked panner, so now when the channel is selected, we could use 8 controls for the channel, for an instrument, but when we click the plugin, these parameters are automatically reassigned to the particular plugin, like so. So as we come over here, these are just assigned, and when the track is selected, so there's a wide variety of controllers that could have multiple, that are kind of limited to 8 plugin parameters. So you could have within the Midi Remote those set to, with the focus quick controls, to a plugin, to an instrument, to a track, depending on how those dynamically change. So with that, you may not need more, but currently it's going to be 8 quick controls that are kind of accessible. But you could have those 8 quick controls dynamically map as needed if you're using the focus quick controls. All right, so we have Buchan checking in from Switzerland. Thanks for joining us. All right, Dallas LaRue asks, when I have a guitar panned to the left and add a reverb on the send causes the track to go back to sounding in stereo. Should the reverb on the send be panned to the left also? So it really doesn't matter. It's when you put a send on, you could pan the send. But so we'll show you just a little trick here. So let's say we have a guitar that's going to be just in the left channel. All right. So when I go to add an effects channel track, I'll come here, let's add a reverb. So now we do this, it's going to be, you hear the reverb in the left and right channel. But if you go to your panning for your sends, so I'm going to come here to the channel, so we can see our send. So we added a stereo reverb, but if we go to our panning, we can now pan the reverb, so it's only on the right, only on the channel where the source is. And I think if we come to this little drop down menu, you could say link panners, so that now as we pan the guitar, the effect send is automatically panned with it. So if you're adding a stereo effect to a mono track, it makes sense to default to a stereo that would be heard in both speakers. But if you want it only in one, you could go to, we see our destination here, and we want the panning to, we could click on panning for that, or if you wanted to automatically follow, just click on link panners directly there. And then now as your channel panner is adjusted, this will automatically go. So you could try just to activate the link panners function, and that will do it for you automatically. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, question from Martin. Is it possible to send MIDI events from multiple tracks to a single instrument track parallel at the same time? Example, because this I track, I guess the VST track is an orchestral ensemble. All right, so let's give it a shot. So let's add an instrument track. We'll just put kind of a string, kind of a generic orchestral sound. Okay, so we'll go strings, and we'll just all right, so let's say if I add MIDI tracks, and so right now we could send these to the Hallian Sonic instrument, and I could send them to MIDI channel 1. So if I just say, let's add a track, add a MIDI track, we can send this to channel 1. So I could have maybe a high pitch on, we'll just put a fake part in. So I could have a high note recorded on this particular track. And we go to this track, let's say we want so these are multiple tracks that are all going to the same instrument, and I'll just unsolo those. So as you select the instrument track, you could double click, you could add MIDI tracks below, assign those to the same MIDI channel. So when we go to our output routing here, send it to channel 1, then these 3 tracks are going to this one string part on that instrument. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Martin. All right, we have MK Music Production just saying hi from the UK. Thanks for joining us. We have DJ FK sending greetings from Germany. We have Vladimir checking in from Serbia. Thanks for joining us this evening. We have Dodo from Italy. Thanks for being on. You see Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. Top Gida from South Africa. Thomas checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us this evening. All right, Tariq asks, how can I import tracks from another project with all the channel settings, mapping, routings to my interface? I just import the tracks. The routing in my original project is not important. So let's say I want to import tracks into this project. I would go to File, to Import. We'll say Tracks from Project. So I'm going to select, let's say, this particular project. We select a project, and I can say, okay, I want the groove agent. I want the vocal, say our mellotron. I want a tambourine track, and I want the vocal. We could import these to new tracks. If we see a matching track, we could do that. We could choose to import just the track settings, or we could import the events and the parts. We could import on existing tracks and the original position. So now I just hit OK, and as we do this, we will now have the tracks from the other project automatically imported directly into the project, like so. So again, start by going to File, Import, Tracks from Project, select your project, and choose which tracks. And if you want to include, the events or parts or just track settings, if you want to import on existing tracks, and that's how you could do it. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Thanks for being online today. All right, we see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, Mickey's Productions. Hey, Greg, if I want to record my accordion, should I use mono or stereo track to record? Also, if I record in mono, can I use stereo effects tracks or mono effects tracks? Thank you. So if you have a recording, so it could really depend. I have a friend, Joey Miskelin, who's just an amazing accordion player, a longtime Cubase user. So I'm not sure, I would record in stereo if you use 2 microphones to capture your accordion. I think that most sources are going to be recorded in mono, but if you record in mono, so let's say I want to take this vocal and I wanted to add effects. If one of the things that we could do in Cubase 13 is we can see this little circle. So this is a mono track. So if I add a reverb, so I'm going to go to Ascend, and I will just right click and let's add a reverb. So we will add a reverb to this track. Right. So in previous versions of Cubase, when we did this, the effects plugins run as inserts would automatically follow the channel width of the track. So when I do this, it's now going to be in the reverb will be in mono.
We played our records into the night.
But I could now in Cubase 13 switch this to stereo.
Up, you wouldn't mind.
And now our reverb.
Up until now,
we'll go from mono to
that
stereo.
was okay.
So you can record a mono source, put stereo effects on it, and vice versa. If you have like Cubase 12 or earlier, what you would do is just right click, go to add track, add effects channel to selected tracks, and that could add an effects send, and that would automatically do the routing. So if you're in mono, you could send it to a stereo effect send and have it in stereo, or when you add the effects channel, you could choose to have it in mono. Either way. So, but I think most people record the accordion in mono. If you're using 2 microphones to capture like the low and high notes, then it would be in stereo. But if you want, I could check on accordion recording techniques with Joey Miskelin. So this is an amazing musician and super nice guy. Plays in a group of writers in the Sky. Won Oscars and Grammys and stuff. All right, my Chatfield jumped. All right, so we see from Coast Mastering, Michael asks, hey Greg, I inadvertently recorded files at 48K with a 96K clock. Note there's a mismatch in the metadata, plays at wrong speed, pitch. Any suggestions how to correct? Sample rate conversion doesn't work. Header info wrong. When we're working with this, I might have to play around with this, but you might be able to kind of switch the header in Wavelab. Might be a tool, and I know you have Wavelab, might be able to do this. But when switching, because it's seeing it as We'll just reread the question. Recorded files are 48K with a 96K clock. Just trying to figure out what would be the best way of doing that. So because it's recorded at 48K, but their clock is at 96. So if, let me know, Michael, if you want it to be 96K or you want the ultimate files to be at 48K. One thing you may be able to do, if it's playing back at the wrong pitch. And I think that if we go to, your project menu. So let's say if we go to our project setup and we do a sample rate conversion. So let's say if I come here and I do a sample rate conversion to 96K and we hit OK. Let's say for this project, it says, do you want to convert to the new rate? We'll convert to the new rate. Do you want to keep the audio events at their sample positions? Here, try saying yes. And that might kind of trick it. But let me know if you're doing kind of like a 48K file, if you want the ultimate destination to be 48 or 96K. And if you have a file that, I probably don't have a kind of a mismatched sample rate file with the metadata, but if you have like a short portion of the file or just an audio file that you could share with me, I realize that you're probably working with sensitive copywritten material, but if there's a way, if you could replicate it and just get a particular file that I could play with so I don't have to try to recreate the scenario on my system. If you want to share it to me, you could email me a download link, Michael. So, and I can see if there's some, and Wavelab is sometimes good for some situations like that, but if you could share a file in that particular situation, I'd be happy to kind of play around with it. All right, we have the artist known as Love checking in from New York. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Michael Teams says, howdy, Greg, bail me out again. Hit points have me confused again. Please go through it again. Thanks. And I think this is with doing audio warping with the hit points. So let me find our project here. Okay, so there's hit points, and hit points can be migrated to other data, such as we can slice based on hit points, but we could also add warp markers based on hit points. So as audio is recorded into Cubase, it's automatically going to have hit points. And if we double click and go to our sample editor, we'll see our hit points tab. So once our hit points tab is open, we could make sure we can see our hit points here, and we want to adjust kind of the threshold to make sure that we're catching the particular notes, but also kind of the intensity. So here you can kind of gauge based on the intensity of notes. So let's say these are my particular hit points. Now I'm going to use the hit points as the basis to create warp markers. So when we see the hit points here, we see this little create function. We're going to expand that option and click on warp markers. Now we may not see these warp markers until we are in audio warp, and we see the warp markers are kind of yellow in color. If we go to our project window and select our warp tool and choose free warp, what this is going to allow us to do is to see our warp markers on the project window. So if we want to change the rhythmic feel of these particular warp markers as we see them visible here. Now, if you don't see them visible, it could be depending on your zoom factor, because obviously at a certain point it's just going to be all yellow vertical lines over the waveform. So as you zoom in, if you don't see those warp markers, just check your zoom factor. And now that we see the warp markers, as I navigate here with the warp tool, so again, make sure that there's 3 different modes for the warp tool, that we're in free warp. And now what this is going to allow me to do, as I kind of hover to the right, and we'll see kind of how the yellow warp marker turns into a white warp marker. So as it turns into the white warp marker, we can now move this. Now, and if we have our grid set up here, I could say I want to move the attack of this note, and it will kind of almost like falling into like a little hole. It will snap to the grid here. So you say this note was a little early, this note was a little late. We can now adjust these positions of notes and have it automatically kind of snap to the grid. And this is really easy way to kind of fix timing irregularities. Now, if we have multiple tracks selected, we can come over here, and again, just once we have our warp markers, so let's say I have like a left and right channel or a multi-mic'd guitar, you know, so again, another method of approaching this is to go to your audio menu, and we'll say real-time processing, create warp markers from hit points. And now we could adjust multiple tracks at the same time. So if you move one and both tracks are selected for like a multi-mic'd guitar or instrument, we can move both tracks simultaneously, or multiple tracks if you have 3 mics or 4 mics. So once you have those warp markers, we can now adjust. So when you record audio, the hit points are going to be tabulated. Double click, go and select hit points. Once we have kind of the threshold and intensity set, as you know, would kind of make sense for the particular musical excerpt or audio excerpt, go to create, choose warp markers, go to your warp marker tool, zoom to a factor where you can see it, and then hover near the warp marker till it turns white, and then freely move. And if snap is turned on, you could have it automatically snap directly to the beat, to the quantized value, to the grid, etc. So let me know if that's helpful, Michael. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Why some of the chord track notes goes up in pitch from the beginning of the track to the end? All right, let me open up a different project. Okay, so we have some chord tracks here. I will All right, so let's say if I duplicate this pattern a couple of times here. So I'll just select arrange and hit Command or Control plus D. All right, and as we go to so it seems like the chord patterns are triggering the same kind of at the beginning or end. So it seems like the chord patterns are actually triggering the same pitches for me. But let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are, but it seems identical pitches on my end. All right, and we have Beulahville, North Carolina, Brian Sawyer Sr. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Rika Sakai joining us from Japan. We usually don't get many people from Japan. Welcome to the live stream. Thanks for being online. It's probably very early in the middle of the night there. And we see Rika Sakai is just checking in from Tokyo. All right, so we see Parasite 70. Hi, Greg. I would like to control the Portamento speed based on velocity dynamics using MIDI transformer or MIDI modifier. So I think this really could depend upon the actual instrument that you're using. I mean, you could adjust, but I think how the instrument will respond is kind of more of the critical aspect. So let's say if we have our retro log here and we're just playing so let's say we'll put this in glide. All right, so let me just move my phone out of the way here. So I'm not sure. Let's see if we could. So we have kind of our glide time. So I think it's really not necessarily what Cubase is transmitting, but how the instrument itself will respond to it. So like here, I could set up. Let's say if we do like. So we could have the speed set up here, but let's say if I wanted this particular parameter, let's see if we could do maybe like a modulation with this. So let's say we want velocity to control, not just cut off, but let's come over here and let's go to let's see if it's and see if this could be set up as something we could do the glide time with the LFO. Let's see, the glide time is kind of in the LFO destinations and modulation matrix. Yeah, but I think it's, we could, so I think how the instrument itself is going to respond to it, so when we're dealing with, Portamento, I think it's, how the instrument will respond to it if it responds to Portamento. But like just seeing here in the modulation matrix, I don't see the glide time that could be kind of have an LFO based on the modulation of the glide time. But let me know if it's a particular instrument. Not saying will we'll do that. But I mean, you could change the Portamento, but there's a good chance that the particular instrument may not actually do, so we could set like our velocity to control, different parameters here. So if I wanted to control, like, let's say distortion, we could drive that, but I don't see the glide time as a destination. But let me know like which particular instrument that you want to do that with, because I think it's going to be really dependent upon the instrument itself and not just the MIDI that's being kind of transformed in Cubase. All right, we see Michael Teams doing his virtual ice cream distribution. Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see, all right, reading through comments. All right, so we see, hello Greg, question. I would like to navigate horizontally with my MIDI controller using Midi Remote, even though I'm aware of the shift plus mouse wheel option. Thank you. So I haven't found a way to do this with the MIDI controller. So the MIDI controllers that I've seen do it are basically emulating kind of the keyboard shortcuts. So I haven't found a way for like this project navigation horizontally that's addressable through a MIDI remote. I will meet up with some of my colleagues next week at the NAMM show, and I'll I have it in my list of notes to find out. It seems like a simple thing to kind of map, and sometimes people will also just, if you press with your mouse button down, that you could navigate vertically and horizontally like this if you have a scroll wheel mouse. But I haven't found a way to do that from a MIDI remote. But maybe after the NAMM show, if there's some solution, I will pass it along. All right. My chat field just jumped. Let me just find my spot where it was. Okay, reading through comments. So he's just Greg, did you get email from my friend Anders? He has a big problem with Hallian Sonic. So I remember, I don't remember the email off the top of my head, but I'm not sure. I may have it in the notes for later. But if you want to, if you have any, if you remind me of what the topic was, I may be able to show it here as well. All right, so we have Razel checking in from Denmark. All right, we have a question. Hi, Greg. When I make a MIDI track dragging from I guess it says a code track, maybe a chord track, sometimes the length of the sound sections are set unintentionally, as if sustain already set. Is there some tips to avoid this? All right, so let's say I'm here. So we could drag like chords from the chord track to our MIDI, and I think it could really depend upon what chords are after it. So let's say if I erase these two chords, if the C chord will be held, so if we drag this down, we can see that the chord here will now be held until the next chord begins. So one other method that you could use to do this, let's say if I put those chords back in, I go to the roads, try going to your project menu, to the chord track, and say chords to MIDI, and that will make kind of one particular pattern here. And then, but I think it may just get held until like the next chord track. So let's say if I delete these three chords, and we'll delete this, again, go to project, to chord track, to chords to MIDI, that I think this E minor chord will be held until the next chord, until there's a next chord seen. And I think at the very last chord, it may just do it for the measure. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, great to see David M. from Liverpool. Thanks for joining us this evening. All right, we see Chris Lee says he's checking in from Missouri. He says excited to hear your report from NAMM when the live stream starts up again. So unfortunately, like everyone else, gets to go to NAMM and see the show and do all sorts of wonderful, fun things. And I'm usually kind of stuck in the booth, and I don't get much of a chance to see stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing lots of friends and catching up. But hopefully, I usually try to get a morning and go early in the mornings and try to go early to see stuff before the show opens. All right, so Marek Gui or Gull says, hi Greg, hello from Warsaw, Poland. How can I restore empty template? It seems corrupted as it crashes the Cubase, even with the preferences restored to default factory ones. So what I would do is maybe like as you're starting Cubase, and I'll just start up Cubase 12. If you're running into problems where it's crashing, it's probably going to be like a third-party plugin. So one of the things that you could do is as you start Cubase, if you're on Windows, hold down Alt, Control, Shift. If you're on Mac OS, hold down Command, Option, Shift. And you will hold this down, hold those keys down right after starting Cubase, and we get into like a safe start mode. So I'm going to start Cubase 12, the older version. Hold those three keys down while it starts. And then when you do this, you could say deactivate all third-party plugins. So what I would do is choose that, save the template under, open the template, see if it opens. If it does, save the template under a different name, and then try to restart with the template. It will still reference the instruments as long as you don't have the deactivate third-party plugins. But again, start the program, hold down Command, Option, Shift, or Alt, Control, Shift. And then see if you could open a template in kind of like a safe startup mode and see if that will allow you to open the template and resave it under a different name. And then once you have that open, that usually will take care of it. Once you have that open, at that point you can just simply open up the start the program normally and see if opening the template will do the trick, but that will get you by some different functions that may have been kind of hanging it up. So all right. All right, so we see from Tony asks, hi Greg, is there a way to name markers in the marker track? Thanks. Just exit out of Cubase here. Yep. So as we add markers, there are some changes made with this in Cubase 13. So say we have a marker track here, and if I drop a marker, we can see that maybe our marker track will be kind of blank. If I drop a marker while holding down the Shift key, now I could just name the marker as the marker is added. If we select the marker, you could also name it in the description field in the info line. If we open up the marker window, you can see the description here and type the name of the marker, like so. So a couple of different approaches. You could also hold down, if we add another marker that we wanted to name, hold Control or Command plus the letter M, and that will open up your markers window where you could type the description. But from version 13, you can now just hold down the Shift key and click as you add markers, and that will open up the name field that you could type a name into. So a couple of different approaches. So again, hold down Shift key, you could select the event, name it, go to the marker description window here, name that, or you could open that window by Control or Command plus the letter M. All right, so we have a question from Juby. Audio connection is not detecting my USB mic. I cannot record. I have no audio interface. Please help. Okay, so when we come to your audio connection, so depending on your USB mic, you may have an ASIO driver, you may not. But if we go to your studio setup, if I had a USB mic, it would probably just on Mac OS may show up directly here. If you're on the Windows platform, you may have to choose generic low latency ASIO device. So let's say if I switch this here, and then from directly below where we see the audio system, select built-in audio, click on control panel. From the control panel, here you would see like input output devices. So it may be, going the audio, it may be looking for audio from like an audio input and sending the audio out of like the headphone jack of your laptop. It may be sending the audio out of an HDMI connection to your display screen. And so here you should be able to see your USB mic as long as it's being recognized by the computer operating system. So select your USB mic for the input and the output. So at this point, again, just go to, if you're on Windows, let me just clear my throat. If you're on Windows, just select generic low latency audio from this choice, from the ASIO driver. Go to your built-in audio driver and make sure that, this is going to send it out to one source. It'll probably default to your audio interface of your computer. Choose this to be your USB microphone. If you don't see your USB microphone listed in the choices here, it's not being recognized by the computer's operating system. So let me know if that works for you. All right, so we see question in the remote control editor label section. Does changing the labels also mean that the labels will change on my DAW controller display? So it could depend upon your DAW controller of what information it's accepting. So there is an API screen editor utility that you could use to do more advanced functions. But if your controller is capable of extracting the names, that could automatically be carried over, but it's not every controller is capable of doing that. So, but you can do that. All right, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, fastest way hit points to MIDI keyboard. So I'm not sure if you wanted to take hit points and transfer it to a MIDI keyboard. So let's say if we have like a loop here. So if we wanted to take this drum loop, I'm going to go into the sampler control at the bottom. And I'll just drag. I'll select the sampler control. I'll drag my loop in. We can go to slice mode. And now that we've done that, we can now just play the different slices. So we'll go to our sampler track that was just created. And we can trigger the particular slices right from here. So if you wanted to play the slices from a MIDI keyboard, you could drag it into Groove Agent or drag it into the sampler track, go into slices, and then you could trigger the individual slices. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding that. Always wonderful to see Val from Vienna joining us. Hope you're doing well in Austria. Mickey's Productions asks, hey Greg, can you please show an example of how you would time warp an MP3 track in Cubase? Let's say a song downloaded from YouTube. I'm having a bit of trouble doing this. Okay, so let's say there's a couple ways of doing this. Let's say we have a stereo track. I'll do a new project. We'll import an audio file. So let's say this is going to be just like a mixed down file. Okay, so if you wanted to, let's say we'll just kind of work with, so let's say, there's a couple different ways if you wanted to, audio warp different sections. So let's say we listen to this. And let me get my audio back, sorry. All right, so when you say audio warp, so one of the things that you could do, I'm not sure if you want to take like a file that's downloaded from YouTube and straighten out the tempo. So, but we'll show a couple different ways. So let's say I just want to do warping on my file. So as we double click, we'll come over here to our hit points. And we'll adjust kind of our sensitivity down here. And all right, so now that we've done this, we'll create warp markers and we go to our warp tool. I can just take any of the hit points here as it's starting. So let's say I want to take this hit and move this hit earlier or later in the project. I'll just say, okay, let's take like this particular downbeat and I'm going to make sure I'm in the correct warp mode. So I'll say free warp. So now I could change the rhythmic timing of it. So if I want to alter, so let's say I want this hit to come in earlier, I could come and just say, but probably what a lot of people may want to do is maybe kind of take a different approach. And if we wanted to, if the end goal, so that's an approach if we want to move the content within the audio file. But if we have an audio file and we want it to be, to figure out the tempo and have it follow a steady tempo, we could go to your project menu, to tempo detection. We'll say analyze. And we'll just kind of listen to it here. All right, so once we've done this, we can see, I'm going to change my meter to 4/4, because that's the meter of the song. Now we have these tempo changes throughout the project here. And we could say we're roughly like 115, 112. It's fluctuating. So let's say I want this maybe to be 116 beats a minute. So if I want this to play back at a steady tempo, I could select the event, go to my audio menu, let's go to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. And what this is going to do is basically apply these tempo changes as metadata in the event. And I'll say, let's make this play back at 116 beats a minute. So now it's playing back at a perfect tempo. You can see kind of the solid line here. And if I wanted to go back to the original tempo that was fluctuating, now perfectly steady. So if I say, okay, I want this to be faster but steady, I can say, let's make it 132. So if you want to do audio warp within the event to move contents within the track, you could do that. Or if you want it to do a tempo detection, you could then take like a 2-track file you download from YouTube and have it, figure out what the tempo is, have other tracks follow it, or just go to your audio menu, again to advanced, to set definition from tempo, and then from that point, we can have it type in a steady value and the fluctuations can now be evened out. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Mickey's Productions. Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. All right, so we see from Reg Edit says, I think he means inversions when he used a chord track. So let me just go back to that project. All right, so we could think of like the chords themselves, like, when we have the chord pads, the chords on the chord track don't necessarily take into account. If we wanted to do inversions of this chord, what you could do is we'll just select then we'll just as we do this, so if you wanted to, so if you kind of select the first chord, at this point you can say I want to do my first inversion, my second inversion. So you could go through different chord voicings here. So if you wanted to take the chord track and change the inversions, you could just select the chords directly here and have different voicing options for the inversions straight from the info line. So thanks for explaining that to me, Regedit. I appreciate that. All right, so we have Home Studio World checking in from Jordan. Thanks for being online tonight. You see the Heartbreak Time Machine has smashed the like button. All right, so we have Seasons 1993. Says, hi, it's the first time he's made it in time here using Cubase since version 5. Well, welcome to the live stream. We're glad that you're able to join us live. Welcome. Hope to see you on future live streams. All right, so we see from Blackbird Officialis. Hi, Greg. How do you automatically align hit points of an audio to grid, for example, guitar DI track? Okay. So let's say I have like a guitar part here, and I'll make this the active project so we can hear it, have it make sense. I'll revert this project. Okay, so I'm going to, when we select the audio event here, and we just go to quantize, so I'm going to open up my quantize panel. All right, so we'll listen to this. And I'll put the click on. So I'm going to say, let's make this into 16th notes, and I'm going to select audio warp on the quantize, and let's just go ahead and we'll make this track larger. So once I have this done, I'm just going to quantize the audio just like I was quantizing MIDI, and it kind of will use those hit points as the basis. So when I do that now, so again, if I want to quantize, you could see visually what it's going to do. Just click right there, and you could just tighten up the audio performance. If you don't see any effect on that after doing that, make sure that you have the audio warp enabled, and then you could quantize the audio, very similarly to how you quantize MIDI information. All right, so we see Eric got his Stream Deck XL to work. It's awesome. So yeah, those are fun pieces. I got one is like every 5 years of service with Yamaha in the US, we get like a little gift, and that was my gift for my 15th anniversary. It's getting the Stream Deck. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, just trying to find my spot here, sorry. Okay, so I think I'm in the ballpark where it was. All right, so we have Randy Lee checking in from the frozen tundra of Texas. Glad you can make it today. All right, Bruno B asks, hello, Greg. How to change action double click? By default, MIDI track is create. I would like to show instrument track, Cubase 12 from Paris. Thank you. So I think it could matter. So let's say if we do a new project, so we double click, and I think it'll just create a MIDI track. If there is an audio track here and we double click, it'll create an audio track. If we have an instrument track already loaded, I think it's going to just add a MIDI track. So I don't think that there is a way to change that. So I don't know of a preference. I'll take a quick look. Yeah, so I don't think that there is a preference, but you could obviously have, keyboard shortcuts for adding instrument instead of double clicking. And this could be like one of those kind of muscle memory things from going back to Cubase on Atari, where it's kind of, a lot of people are just kind of so used to that, it could be kind of drastic changing it. But I don't know of a way to automatically have a double click open up an instrument track as opposed to MIDI track, but I'll pass that along as maybe a potential preference. All right, so we see Martin asks, by the way, is it possible to sync retrolog to glide time to project BPM? Example, to get it to 4 bars long. Let's take a look. So I'm not sure if it's synced to the project time. I think it's going to be just the particular value here. Let me just open up quick. All right, so just put glide on and but I don't think that I don't see a way to sync that. I just kind of see the overall time, so we could see it's 5,000 milliseconds. Let me just see if there's a sync somewhere else for the options. Yeah, so I think that we could just see the time in milliseconds there, which I guess you could do math, but I can see where it may make sense to have a sync option so you could see the actual measures, but you probably could figure it out just by doing simple arithmetic with that. But let's see if we do sync mode here to beat. Yeah, I don't see the glide time here. So if it was something that we could modulate, a modulatable parameter, I think we could do it. I'll play around with this some more to see if But here, you know, we have up to 8 measures for your LFO, and those could be synced. But I don't see that as a routable function, but I could play around with it over the weekend and see if I come up with anything. Sorry about that, Martin. All right, so Homeworld Studio asks, hi Greg, I feel some changes when I hold over solo on a track. Could you please explain if there are any useful additions related to track mute solo? So I think it's one thing that's, you know, maybe changed for some people. So let's say if we are here, I will revert. Okay, so let's say if we have so I think one thing that may have kind of changed slightly is if we have multiple tracks selected, and you know, this may have been something that changed, and we hold down kind of the Alt or Option plus the Shift key to do, like I wanted to solo both of these tracks, that they could go into solo defeat mode, whereas other versions you could just solo those, but if you hit just the S key on the selected tracks, you could solo those. So if I have these 3 tracks selected, I could just hit S without having to do any But if you were doing it in like quick control mode, which a lot of people had been doing, if you hold down like Alt, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then I think if you release the Option key, release the Alt or Option key, that all 3 will now be soloed, but you may not need to do that as much if we have these 3 tracks selected, and then you could just solo those. So those are that's the only change that I know of, like that may be affecting, that may have an effect in version 13, but let me know if that's kind of what you were talking about. We see, hi Greg, what model mouse do you use? So I have just turning it over. It's a VSSO Plur. I think VSSO Plur. And the reason I have this particular mouse is, one, it's like the mouse click is quiet, and I could switch between, like on my office, I have 3 different computers, and I have my keyboard. I could switch between 3 computers, and my mouse I could switch between 3 computers. So that way I could have one keyboard and mouse and work on 3 different computers and switch which computer they're being routed to. So just kind of a standard generic, I think it's $20 on Amazon kind of mouse, but I got it for the quiet click button. That's not like, that's another mouse that's kind of a louder click, and the ability to switch between 2 different Bluetooth channels and one 2.4 gigahertz channel. All right, we have John Barry checking in from Devon in England. Thanks for joining us. All right, David M. asks, hi Greg, I edited audio, video in Cubase. On export it says project and video frame rate do not match. How do I fix this, or does it matter? The exported file plays okay, thanks. So the easy way to do it is go to your project menu, to project setup, and you'll see your project frame rate. So you just want to click here and choose to get frame rate from video, and then that will automatically match. So it may play back fine, but if someone else was doing any work with editing of it after you, then that could cause problems. But again, to match the frame rate of the video to the project, go to your project menu, to project setup, and click get frame rate from video. And then you'll see the frame rate automatically match right there. See, Garrett says, I need a NAMM booth escape plan. Yeah, this year was kind of interesting for, we had a meeting about booth assignments. Everyone else gets half a day, and then I get like a full day shifts. So I usually don't get a chance to go. So I have to ask everyone else what they saw and was interesting to them at NAMM. And great to see you online, Gareth. All right, so we see just a comment about the chord track dragging. It says, thank you for answering my question on dragging from chord track to MIDI. I understand what you say, but sometimes the sound of one chord doesn't stop and overlaps with the next one to make a dissonance. One thing to check is if you have the chord track playing on an instrument, is to make sure that, if we drag this, I'll just add an instrument track here. Okay, so if we have this and we go to the project menu, to chord track, and we say chords to MIDI, make sure that, it could be that sometimes these chords may still be triggering the sounds of this track while this is playing MIDI. So out of curiosity, try just muting the chord track to make sure you're not having a duplicate of the chords being monitored through the track while the track is playing back chords as well. So try that. All right, so we see Gareth says shift plus add marker equals the revelation of the day. We now have a new acronym for revelation of the day of ROTD. All right, so I see the all right, so I see your email, Benny. So I'll see if you, let me just see if you have the, I thought you may have covered this a little bit. Let me, but Benny, if you want to send me the email from your friend, I could respond directly to them as well. But thanks for sending that along. Okay. Gareth wants everyone to mark the likey for Greg. All right. All right, so we see from Blackbird Officialis asks, hi Greg, is there a way to move a track up and down the timeline using a keyboard shortcut? Also regarding shortcuts, I've noticed that Cubase 13 forgets keyboard shortcuts I assigned. Do you know what it is? Let's see if there's follow-up. All right, so I don't know of a key command to take a particular track and move this track up and down with a keyboard shortcut. There is functions, there are key commands for or if I have an event here that we could nudge up and down. So I'll assign nudge up and down to my, so we can move events up and down, but tracks we kind of move with the mouse. So let me just come here. So I will assign these two functions. Let's assign the next one to nudge down. So I think if we so now I could nudge events to different track using nudge up or nudge them down, but I don't know of a keyboard shortcut to automatically move an entire track up or down. So I don't think one exists. I haven't found it yet. If anyone knows of it, let me know. But I'll pass it along as our kind of feature request to Steinberg. All right, Seasons 1993 asks, "Hi Greg, greetings from Northern Germany. What is the fastest way to crossfade to audio parts?" So really all you have to do is, let's say if I have these two parts and I wanted to crossfade, you could just select, one event over top and you could hit the X key. So let's say if I want to come here and I want to select these two events and I want, let's say, I'm here, we can take those events and hit the X key, and then we could do just kind of a crossfade between them. If you have two events, let me just copy this event. I'll just duplicate this. All right, let me just modify one preference so that I have delete overlaps turned off. Okay, so now so if you don't have delete overlaps, as these two events are overlapping, hit the X key and that will do a crossfade. If this event is duplicated next, let's say we have these two events here that are right next to each other, you could select both events and hit the X key. And as we zoom in, we'll notice just a short crossfade. So as long as if you have two events that are overlapping or are directly next to each other, you can just come here, select those events, and hit the X key. So the X key looks like a crossfade. So as we come over here, you can see that the crossfade is handled. If you don't see a crossfade, just like how it was when I started, make sure that you go to your preferences and that delete overlaps is not checked. With delete overlaps checked, as the two events are overlapping, the one that's kind of on top will delete the contents under it and won't do a crossfade. All right, so we have music for Old Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining us today. All right, we see Jay from Secret Studios. Thanks for being on. So we see question for Black Friday sales. I updated Wavelab Pro on December 4th or 5th, 2023. But there's a promo video for version 12 yesterday when it launches. Next week, will I be covered by the grace period? So usually the grace period is just a month back, I think is the normal grace period time with that. So I'm not sure if December 4th or 5th would be eligible for the grace period. I haven't seen the grace period date mentioned to me yet. But it usually just goes back a month. But, you could think of, you probably got a pretty hefty discount during the promotional sale as well. So, all right. see Gareth is indicating that the famous drummer Pablo needs some black bean soup. So maybe he could get on the Black Friday special. All right. All right, great to see Mark Rabin on. All right, we have DJ Mixes sending greetings from Switzerland. All right, we see that Mark Rabin's dog Stella is on, so everyone give a big woof to Stella. All right, so we see question. I'm using the Novation Remote 61 SL and trying to set it up with Midi Remote. Unfortunately, it only recognizes the pads, not the knobs or faders. Can you assist me with this, please? All right, so one thing you want to make sure is if you have the Novation configured as a different type of remote. So a lot of times it may be configured as maybe a Mackie control device or maybe a generic remote script that the company has provided. So if it is set up as a Mackie control where you see your Novation listed here, try to set those to not connected because that may be blocking the MIDI communication for those ports for the MIDI remote to actually take control and utilize the functions in the MIDI remote. So if you have your MIDI controller, configure it as a Mackie control, generic remote, or some script here in the studio menus, studio setup, try to just simply disconnect those ports and see if you can then make your script based on that. It could be basically that the MIDI communication is going into your already defined going directly to your already defined MIDI controller script as opposed to and blocking it from reaching the MIDI remote script. All right, so you see from AWC, hi Greg, you said in order to remove HSSE tracks from the mix console in Artist 11, go to VST Instruments and delete it there. However, there are no HSSE tracks in the VST Instruments panel. So let me go ahead and I'll just switch a setting here in my preferences. So I'm going to just choose on MIDI file, import. So I'm going to import a MIDI file. We'll create a new project. Okay, so when we do this, so now you may see as like Howie and Sonic. So I'm going to come right over here. We go to our VST instrument. So I just imported the MIDI file because I had the preference under MIDI files when import that the destination goes to instrument tracks or goes to Howie and Sonic SE multi-timbral. So now I see this, it may be listed not as HSSE, but as Howie and Sonic. So I'm going to come select this right here and choose no VST instrument. And we can see that those would automatically carry over. So again, we'll go to the mix console. So I will just kind of do this whole process again. So import MIDI file. We'll create a new project. So go to the VSTI column here. We see that we have Hallian Sonic, HSSE main here. So, and then we'll just choose this as no VST instruments, and then that particular instrument has disappeared from the mix console as well as from the instrument rack in the VSTI section. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. In Very Audio, there's a straighten curve for pitch. Is there something with similar interface for volume changes, perhaps in Wavelab? I'm aware of compressors can do it. So let's... So there's a couple of ways to kind of approach it. So one, if you have Very Audio, so let's say I want to take a look at this, we will go to our Very Audio tab. And I'll just make this kind of full size. All right, so within Very Audio, if we see your smart controls, these should be set, we'll say show all smart controls. I'll kind of zoom this out. So when we go to the lower right-hand corner of a segment, we could adjust the overall volume for the segment. It's not kind of dynamic, but just like what we do with the, straighten the pitch, we could kind of correct the pitch here. If you go to the lower right-hand corner, you could increase and decrease the volume of the segments right there. So it's not necessarily where it's, tightening it up or, the straighten pitch where we're doing various amounts, but I could just come here. We don't necessarily see it represented, but we could adjust the gain there. So again, once you're in Very Audio, make sure that you have the smart controls set to show all smart controls. And then as we're kind of working with it, just the lower right-hand corner could do volume. If you wanted to do pre-gain volume changes or like pre-fader, you could just draw in with the pencil on the event. Or if you wanted to do automation, you could do that, and that would mimic like your fader. So as you play back, the fader would adjust. So there's a couple different approaches. You could do it on the event by grabbing the pencil tool, by grabbing the lower right-hand edge when all parameters are shown, or as automation. So let me know if that's helpful. So we see question, is the Cubase manual helpful for mastering input transformer values 1, 2, and 3 in the event target filter column? Despite its power, this tool is often overlooked. So it will go through the various, some of the terminology is changed in Cubase 13 with the input transformer. So it used to be like value 1, value 2, value 3, those, and value 1, value 2, value 3 of MIDI messages will change depending on a MIDI message. So if it's a MIDI note message, value 1 is going to be pitch, value 2 is down velocity, value 3 is up velocity. But if you're doing MIDI continuous controllers, value 1 is going to be the actual controller, value 2 is the amount of the controller. So, but those are listed in the manual. So once you go to your project here, you could open the panel. And in version 13, as we're kind of transforming different actions, we could say, we say type is note, and then it'll immediately go to velocity here as opposed to value 1, but you could also say subtype is going to be, equal to, so you'll see pitch, velocity, those changes will automatically kind of pop up here by default when you go to figure out value 1, value 2, value 3, but those are all kind of listed in the documentation. Do a lot of people not read that part of the documentation? Yes, but it is in there. But I think a lot of people would find learning the input transformer is a great way to do it, is, when you need it to work with it, or just, work from there's a number of presets, kind of work from those presets, and you could see the logic of it. All right. All right, Ed Rugman asks, in the very audio editor, quantize pitches when use editor scale is sometimes transposing all the note blobs to the same pitch for me. Adding a chord track fixes it. Glitching, is it a bug? All right, so it could be, let's say we're in our very audio here. All right, so when we go to our pitches, so we'll go to our scale assistant. So we'll just open up our scale assistant. So it could be that a lot of times when people say, okay, we're going to use the scale, so let's go ahead and now quantize. So, make sure, that your scale is set here. So if you're, using the chord track, we could, we kind of know what the scale is from the chord track, but sometimes people will go to use editor scale and not set the scale within the editor here correctly. So make sure that, you have the correct scale set. Because a lot of people may just say, oh, I'm in, C, but they may just say, okay, I'm in a pentatonic scale versus a major or harmonic minor or melodic minor scale. So, confirm again that you have the correct scale set here. So if you have the chord track, that's going to utilize the chord track in its scale, or if you wanted to set it independently within the very audio editor. But a lot of people may not think to actually do the full scale there. All right, so we see from Home Studio World, thanks Greg, I think MP3 file, there's space at start. Is there any tempo effects when set tempo? So if you have space at the beginning, sometimes it may just kind of put a generic value in, sometimes, but you could also trim the MP3 to start at when the particular file begins. But as you do that, where the file begins, if you go to the, let's see if we still have the editor window open. We still have the project. Yeah. So, if you're working with that, one of the things is like right where the project starts. Let's say if we had silence and this is where the project started, what I would do with the signature track is right where the downbeat is set the signature track and use the signature track to start the actual, at the beginning of the song. So you can say this is where the downbeat is, and you may have like a pickup note. So you can say, this is where I want to put the signature track right here, and use that as the anchor point. Okay, So we have a question, Greg, I have Cubase 12 Pro. Can you tell me how you work out the key from an audio sample from vinyl? So let's say we have a chord track here. So I'm going to add a chord track. Actually, don't you think we need? I'll add a chord track to start. So we'll come add a chord, and then one of the things you can do is just drag the file, an audio file, to the chord track. It's going to do an analysis of the file and automatically create the chord, and we'll see that our chord track automatically created just like that. And then if you want to do like harmonic changes, you could just kind of set those up right there. So drag the file, drag the sample to a chord track, and that will tell you kind of what the chords are for that particular sample. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Try to. All right. Just reading through comments. I see, Greg, how can I make all velocities in the editor to the same value, please? This is from Tony Trunzo. So let's come over. Just add a MIDI track here. All right, here's my 21st century composition. We'll look at our velocities. All right, so let's say I'm looking at the velocities of all of these notes. We just extend this event. All right, and let's say these are all same velocity. So I want to select all of the notes, and we see the velocity value here. So I think if I hold down, maybe shift, let's say I want 100, maybe control or command. So I type in the velocity value and then, yeah, hold down control or command. So if I select all of the notes, I'll do control or command plus the letter A. Let's say their velocities are varying. I type in a value, let's say 96, hold down the control or command key and then hit enter. And now all the velocities for all the notes are fixed at 96. So again, go to the info line, type in the value, hold down control command and hit enter, and then all the velocities will be fixed to the value that was typed in. See, Randy Lee says he has spicy Chinese food en route on this cold day. Sounds like a good plan. All right, so we have Bruno B saying hello from Paris. Gareth says it's great to have the warm voice of Greg during the cold winter nights. All right, reading through comments. All right, let's see. Northern Hemisphere seems to be cold for most people. So All right, so we see MK Music Production. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to create a custom instrument track with the correct expression map preloaded? Okay, so let's come over here. I will open up a project. So I think if we save it as a track preset that the expression map is automatically carried over, but we'll test it to make sure. All right, so I'm going to open up the expression map. I will go to the expression map and we will import the key switches. Okay, and I'm going to now come over. We'll right click on the track and we will save a track preset. So we will call it January 19th cello expression. Okay, so I will now come over. Let me delete that track. Let's go to my media, to user presets, to track presets, to VST instruments. All right, we'll see our January 19th cello expression. I'll drag it over. And now when we go to edit, we could see all the expression maps have automatically been retained. So all you have to do is right click, save a track preset. That track preset, when you want to have access to it, you would go to user presets, to track presets, to VST instruments, and then just drag it over and all of your articulations will automatically be preserved for you. Let me know if that's helpful. See, Keith Worms just said, did you just mention Atari? Just blew the dust off my 1040 STE for sale. So yeah, I had a Mega 4 ST and a Falcon personally. Actually, I had Atari give me a Falcon. That was nice of them. All right, so we have a question from Masty Mazak. Hello, sir. How can I use Waves bundle plugin in Cubase 12? Please explain. So once you install the plugins, you're going to want probably to install the VST3 versions and to make sure that you have the 64-bit versions. Once you've installed the 64-bit VST2, or if it's VST2, you can utilize it on Windows easily. If you're using a M1 or an Apple Silicon-based Mac, you would need to use VST3. And then once they're installed, VST3 will automatically go to it knows the exact path where the plugins will be installed. If it's a VST2 plugin and you're on Windows, if you go to your VST plugin manager, you can see this little settings cogwheel right here, and now you could add the VST plugin path for VST2 plugins. And then once you do that, they will show up as just in your list of options for your plugins. So any third-party VST, just as long as it's, again with Apple Silicon native, you need to run VST3 versions. Waves has been VST3 for, probably over a decade now, so shouldn't have any problems. All right, so Bruno B asks, hey Greg, how can I see all versions saved to restore old copy? So, if you save the same project with the same name over and over and over again, you're not able to necessarily save to go back and say, okay, I want to go back to 7 saves ago. It's only going to be, just like a Word document or a text document. If you save it under a name, you can't necessarily go back 3 or 4 versions. Now, with Cubase, there's a preference to automatically go back under General to do an auto save. So if you have an auto save set, this will create backups in the background so that you could, at that point, go back and they're going to be at the same exact folder level as your project, and it'll be labeled .bak, and that's a backup of the project. What you can do if you wanted to, gradually evolve your project so that you could go back to versions, to previous versions if you needed to, is to, as you save, do a save as, or you could do save new version. And what save new version will allow you to do is, as you save the new version, it just kind of increments a number. So you could say, I'm on, this file 1, and you hit save new version, it'll be the same file, but a number 2 at the end, a number 3 every time you do that. So just like any kind of standard, saving paradigm, like you have one project that could be saved under the name, you could do save as or save new version. And if you are stuck and you need to, maybe go back, depending on your save interval time, you could use the backup, open up a backup project at .bak file. All right, Gareth asks, is there a feature from inside Groove Agent to reverse the stereo of a sample? I got a set of stereo tom samples in a Steiny preset that I'd like to flip. All right. So I'm not sure if it's in. So let's go take a look. There could be a different approach in a beat agent kit versus an acoustic agent kit. All right, so we'll come over here. All right, so let's say if we want to, like this tom will be a little more panned to the left. So let's see if we come over here. So here's where we can normalize it. Let me just see if there's. All right, let's just, I don't think it's going to be under the pitch tab. Let me just. So we could reverse the sample, but it doesn't change the left right. think it would be under the sample tab here if it was. So we could show to left, channel show to right. So I don't know. I think it would probably be over here. So if it's in a like an acoustic agent kit, what you could do, I'll show you that here. And let's say if I have like a fill going on, just find something with more toms. All right, so what we could do in Groove Agent, like an acoustic agent, if you go to the mixer and go to the kit mix, you could swap the left and right channels here. So you have that option where you can now kind of take the toms and then flip the left and right. And like as you do that, you could do it easily just by kind of clicking on the kit mix channel and do it for acoustic agent. But I don't know off the top of my head how to do it on like an acoustic agent kit. Just take one more. Just take one more quick look and see if we could. And maybe if we go back to the Virginia Beach kit, we had stereo samples on. Yeah, so I don't see a stereo flip option here, but I wonder if we take this particular pad and if we assign it to a particular output. So let's say I want tom 1 going out of output 2, and we go to the mixer. So I guess if we come over and if we route this to, and we see it in our mixer, where we have, let's say our kick, snare, we want this tom to be inverted. We could just put it on a combined panner, and you could do it like that in the mixer output as well. So let me know if that makes sense. But you could do it from the kit mix channel on an acoustic agent as well. See, Bruno B just says, you do not use a trackball mouse. No, and I saw that people on Facebook were, my mouse movements were really irritating, and someone was wanting to start a GoFundMe page to get me a trackball. So, but I wanted one with kind of like a center ring, and also when it worked on 3 computers. So, in years past, I used to use trackballs like in early 90s. But since the kind of mouse scroll wheel, I've kind of shied away from trackballs. But sorry if you hear my mouse all the time. I realize it can be irritating. Okay, wonderful to see Nick on. Glad you can make it today. All right. Nick has work and he'll catch up over the weekend, but glad that you came to. I'm sure you hit the like button like you usually very diligently do. So glad that you can make it. Have a wonderful weekend. All right, John Barry asks, a question, Greg, please. MIDI through in preferences can be disabled for when an external instrument does not have local off, but why does this switch also cut MIDI through to internal VSTIs as well? So sometimes, when you, come to the preferences, we'll see our preference. We will, go to MIDI. I think it's going to be under our editing. Or just click on MIDI here. So we had the MIDI through. So, MIDI through isn't necessarily, it's often used for instruments that don't have local control, but what, MIDI through is doing is it's just taking the MIDI input and then it's sending it, through the program to other devices. So if you wanted to have your virtual instruments playback and have your MIDI controller not be able to communicate with those instruments intentionally, you could just disable the MIDI through, and then the MIDI is not being routed through for channeling, for velocity, for that information into Cubase. So this is more of a global function, and that global function is often used to work with keyboard controllers that don't have a local off. So that's really kind of more, the workaround. But that's what MIDI through is kind of rechannelizing that MIDI information going into Cubase to other devices, and that's a way to kind of turn it off. All right, so we see Seasons 1993 says many, many thanks. All right. You see that Mark Rabin's dog Stella is well loved, so that's good. All right, so we see, is there a way to do flanging using Elastique or Audio Warp? So let's go ahead and we can show you just kind of a quick method. Okay, so I want to duplicate this track. All right, and I'm gonna take the same file, and what I'm going to do, is to give it a different, I'm going to bounce selection so that it's not kind of doing the processing on the same file. All right, so as we work with this, let's say if we wanted to maybe almost mimic tape flanging. So now when I select a particular file, we could have this file in musical mode and this file not in musical mode. So as we want to play, let's say we play these files. So I'll make sure it's not going to kill everyone volume-wise. So now we have kind of the two files playing. One is set to musical mode. So our top one was kind of set to musical mode, and our bottom one is not. So when I select this particular file, and we could do just kind of subtle. And we hear kind of a flanging effect. But if I take this top file, so if you do like just a subtle tempo change from the original file and just kind of placing it into musical mode, you can kind of get flanging effects like that. The elastique by itself will stretch the audio, but it doesn't necessarily by it, in context alone will do a flanging effect. But when you do it in comparison to another file, that's when you can get a flanging effect. If you kind of duplicate the files and again set it to, one will be processed through musical mode, one won't be, and then you could just kind of dial in the flanging right there. So again, if I take it out of musical mode, you have two files playing back. One's in musical mode, and we can say like 120.113. So now it's playing the same files. So one file could play against the other one, and that could create the flanging effect. So I can remember doing, being involved with how to actually, like I remember being in a session in New York where, this old guy came in and he was like a flanging guy, and he was a guy who came in with his thumb, and he got called in for 10 minutes, made a couple $100 and just put his thumb on a 2-track and, moved his thumb up and down to get the flanging effect, and did 2 passes and left and got his, got a couple $100 cash and, went on his way. So, but you could kind of mimic that same behavior using kind of audio warp stuff. All right. Also seeing from Gareth on the Groove Agent. He just kind of sent a picture. Thanks for doing that. But on the Groove Agent tip, so if we wanted to just come here to Groove Agent and we load up, let's say the Virginia Beach. That on the effects. So we'll come over here to the mixer that you could go to the stereo pan, and then you could probably swap the effect right there. So all right, thanks for sharing that, Gareth. All right, so Seasons 1993 asks, one last one. When I recorded more takes of a part, how to select the one I want and delete the other takes. All right, so I'm not sure. We'll just come over. And I'm not sure if it's going to be like just a quick, if they're like stacked recordings, but we'll do both. Okay, so I'll just come and we'll do some like stacked recordings. And now we'll punch in a couple times here. Okay, so let's say have a number of files. Here we'll go to my pool. I'll hit Control or Command plus the letter P, and we could look at all of my files that I've just recorded here. So let's say I really only want this take. So I'll just come here. I think we could just do an invert selection. All right, so let's say I want that take, and we look at my pool window. So when I just did a delete, so if you have just a file that you want here, and we'll go to our pool window. I'll keep this on so we can see all of our files. So I want to keep this file. I'll go to my edit, and let's say we'll just do a select. I'll invert the selection. Okay, we'll open up our pool window again. And now when I come here and delete, you'll see that all of the files that we just erased can automatically just do that one more time. So we'll look, so invert that selection, delete. Now we go to our pool window and we can see that you only have like the files right there that weren't deleted, and the other ones went into the trash, where we could just now empty, right click to empty trash, and we could erase those from the pool or just erase them from the hard disk. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so Bruno B asks, another question. When I duplicate a track with color, when I try to change the color using shift and mouse, event color is not changing, normal. So I think, so let's say I want to, we'll remove these tracks. So I'm going to duplicate this track. So we see the same color. So now this track is selected. I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option. So I don't think it's Shift that changes the color, but Alt or Option will change the selected track color. And if you click with Alt or Option there, you can see all of your track colors pop up. But try using Alt or Option, and then it looks like the duplicated track, you can change the color like so. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer says, yeah, so if you are going to the NAMM show, I know you live close to where the convention is, Tim, stop by the Yamaha booth. I'll be in the streaming section. All right, so we see my download manager is not working properly, and I tried reinstalling everything. How can I fix it? So sometimes if I think you need to install it as a administrator, but there's some other core components that you can install. So let's say, I'll just search the support database here. So I think it's there are some things that you could manually install. So I think if you come over here, like there are a couple of like ways where you could just download different, like just a different installer components and install from there. So, but there are a couple of support articles with that. But make sure that you are installing it as the administrator, and that will often kind of fix a lot of the issues with that. All right, Paul Claridge asks, Greg Longshot, but I will ask anyways. When importing files, is there a preference that will make them mono automatically? So it's not going to make them mono automatically, but if you import a file, there's a preference to automatically split. So where you could split the mono file. So let's say we want to go to, I believe it's under editing, to audio, and we'll say on import, we could say use settings, and you could say split channels. So now if we import an audio file, we could put them to different tracks, and we could have the left and right channels automatically split. But if you're importing the file, it's automatically going to import the file in its entirety, but you could choose to split it as needed. So we see Jazz Dude posted a link for all the direct downloads. Yeah. You see Gareth uses the built-in plugins into Groove Agent lots. Okay, reading through. All right, we see that Randy's Chinese food has arrived. Hope it keeps you warm. All right. Okay, sorry, just my chat field moved again. Just trying to find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right. So we see a question: when importing audio tracks into a template, is there any way to import into the template tracks? I find that the imported tracks go into additional tracks, so I have to reset the colors and inserts. So if you're importing from, let's say let's come over, I'll do a project here real quick. So let's say I have this project. So I'm not sure if you're importing tracks if you're just importing like just separate individual audio files, but if you do, I can import tracks from project. So if you have a project already, let's say you're kind of working on a template from that. So let's say, okay, I want to go to here. So I'm going to select this project. So it's all right. So we have a project here, and we could come over. I'll select all the files, and we can see that we could have the destination when we're importing tracks from a project to a new track, but we could also say select matching track. And once we're here, we could just choose these particular files. So if we're doing it from a project, we could select the matching names from the particular tracks and have those imported into the template for those particular files. But if it's just kind of dropping, if it's just kind of like importing an individual file, you could drag it to a particular track. But if you do it from importing from a project, you could do it that way. So let's say if I'm just dragging an audio file to this track, now I could do it, and it will if we drag to the selected, import to the selected track, by dragging, it'll retain the colors. But if they are set up in projects and you're importing it into your template, then you could select by matching or just manually doing it here. Okay, John Costigan just says, may I please have a like? I'm deprived. So we'll make sure that John is happy. All right, so Ed Rugman, going back to his quantizing to the editor scale, just says, sorry, back to the quantize pitch issue. The scale is set correctly, but when I press the quantize pitch button, the blobs all go to one pitch, as all B's in my case, regardless of the scale picked. All right, so let's say I'm here. I'll just do it on a different project. I think in this project, I'm in the key of A. So I'm going to say we're in A major, and then I'll say quantize pitches, and you can see that they just all kind of navigate it and quantized within a scale and not to a particular scale here. So again, using the editor scale, just quantize pitches. So if you want to send me like a screenshot or a little project where maybe that's happening, if you want to share it to me via like a WeTransfer or Dropbox type of thing, I'd be happy to take a look at it, Ed, and you can share that to clubcubase@steinberg.de. but let me know if I did anything differently than you did. Mark Rabin wants to hear my mouse drawn in composition with all velocity values at 127. You probably don't. All right, so we have a question from Studio 7, I think it's Casimo. Hi, Greg. In the chord track section, what does algorithm versus cadence mode mean? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let me just do a quick. All right, so let's say I'm doing A. All right, and we'll skip a couple chords. Okay, so when we are utilizing the chord assistant, so let's come over here. Let me just go to the list. We could see that we have a cadence or common notes. So cadences in music are going to be like, you know, particular like chord progression patterns. So if you were thinking of like a traditional classical composition, you know, like often you would have like, you know, a 5 chord going to a 1 chord. So that's the most common classical music cadence. If you were doing like music for churches, like hymns, you know, they have a plagal cadence, and that's going from the 4 chord to the 1 chord, like an amen type of chord progression. So cadences are kind of like very common chord progressions for navigating from one chord to the next chord that have been used in classical compositions for hundreds of years. And not only in classical compositions, but, you know, when you go from a 5 to a 1 chord to end a song, that's very common in pop music and rock music, you know, for that type of you know, progression. When we're working with common notes, it's going to look, you know, on notes between, let's say if we are in C minor going to F minor, it'll say, okay, you know, we have C, E flat, G, we have, you know, F, A flat, C. So maybe if we're using common notes, it would start by suggesting, so we want to do previous and next chord, and we say common notes, we could see that it would probably start off with C. But if we were utilizing cadences, that we would have, you know, going to a G chord in between. So these are just kind of, you know, whether the notes before and after are sharing pitches. If we want to do that, that's what common notes would be. And cadences is often going to be like 5 to 1, like the 5 chord resolving to the 1 chord, or the 4 chord resolving to the 1 chord. And are, you know, typical cadences that have been used for, you know, hundreds of years. So it just allows you to kind of switch between those two different suggestions. Okay, we see from DB, hi Greg, the metronome of Cubase 13 does not give a click sound. How could I activate it? Okay, so you want to make sure so I'm going to just come here, and as we're playing, I'm going to hit the C button, and we should hear the click track. Now, if you don't hear the click track, so make sure, one, that it's on in the transport. Where we get this problem a lot is when people are utilizing the control room, because you could have the click turned off in the control room as well. So let me just check my routing here quickly. Just turn this off, sorry. So if you're utilizing the control room, make sure that you have the click enabled in the control room for the monitoring. So you could have the click track turned on here, not hear it because we're utilizing the control room. We need to activate the click track there. If you have those two buttons turned on, go to your transport menu to metronome setup, and you can go to click sounds and make sure that you're using, you could have, you know, different sounds and different presets. So if you wanted to have, you know, there's a number of presets that come with Cubase. Like if you want like a Uri click, you go to vintage spike, or if you wanted to go, and you could just go to the use the click sound right there and make sure that you hear it directly there. So, but most of the time when I get this question, it's going to be that it got turned off in the control room. So make sure that the click is activated there. All right, so we see David Blues asks, hello, Greg, what are the purpose of XML files in Cubase? So XML files is kind of a container type, and lots of different functions within Cubase can be exported as XML files. So you could have a music XML file, and that's often used for getting music notation. If we have gone through and done some music notation, and we've done a lot of aligning, you know, visual aspects of the score. So I'll just show you here. So I'll revert this so we have notes in. All right, so if we're in our score editor, we could come over, and if I've, you know, painstakingly set out how each note, and I want to translate that as, you know, with those layouts and lyrics as a music XML into Cubase, we could export a music XML. XMLs can also be utilized for a lot of presets. So there could be XMLs that are referencing, like, you know, key command presets, logical editor presets, project logical editor presets are all XML files. Also, XML files could, like when we work with a track archive, when we export selected tracks and we want to import those tracks, it's going to reference the tracks with their timing as an XML file. So we can think of an XML, we see it a lot through kind of different aspects of the program. And I'm not an XML developer or editor, so I'm kind of software development stupid. I can use software, okay, but I'm not a developer. But this is kind of like a container type that can contain, that can hold a lot of different aspects that's often used. So, you know, some people say, oh, why don't we have XMLs inside of Cubase, you know, in the media bay, you know, because an XML file, even though it's the same .xml, could contain vastly different types of information, you know, and it's not just in Cubase, but other programs would utilize XML files as well. All right, so we see question from Yash. How do I strum MIDI in Cubase? You know, so there's a lot of, you know, there's some different types of MIDI functions. So let's say if I wanted to do, we'll add an instrument track, I will just add a Hallian Sonic, and we'll throw an acoustic guitar. So we'll just say, all right, so say, all right, so we have a nylon guitar. So let's say if I wanted to do, so one of the things you could do is just go to like chord pads. And if you wanted to activate the chord pads, we could have presets for the chord pads. So we could say, I want to play a pattern. And let's come over, you know, we could have a guitar pattern that we could play. Let me just check my, come over here to my chord pad. So if we wanted to, oops. Sorry, I have some of my keys programmed for. All right, so to say all MIDI inputs here. And once you're inside of Howling and Sonic, you know, one of the other things that you could do is I want to take these chords and we could say, let's go to MIDI or edit, I'm sorry, and we could say, let's go to our flex phraser. And there's all sorts of great kind of guitar chords that we could do. So let's say, okay, I want to come here, I want to do Latin chords. And as I play chords, now if you find that you want to just kind of do like a quick guitar strum, let me just put in, I'll populate some chords here quickly with a chord track. Okay, so now let's say I drag these. Let me just select. All right, so, and if one of the things that you could do if you wanted to just do, instead of it playing like a block chord, so let's say, and I'll just move these next to each other here quickly. So let's say as we listen to this, we could try out like even just inside of, and once we're here, we could just say, okay, I want to just take, but if you wanted to do kind of just via editing, if you grab the trim tool here, then just hold down the Alt or Option key, we could just take those chords and kind of do strums, kind of like that, and space it out. So you could use some of the tools that are built into the chord pads. If you wanted to use the flex phraser that's built into Howling and Sonic with any of the instruments, or just be able to come here and use the trim tool, hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you could just kind of draw in different chord strumming patterns. And if you want to kind of truncate the end as well, you could do it just like that. All right. All right, so we see from Home Studio World, it says, many thanks, Greg. In fact, Cubase with Greg's explanation is a powerful way to produce music. So I think that the developers at Steinberg did a lot of cool stuff. I just get to help explain it. All right, Dski asks, hi, Greg, how to save your key command settings as a backup? Thank you. What I would do is just go to the edit menu, because if you're going to save your key commands, you might as well save the other functions and other settings all at the same time. And that's what the profile manager does. So go to your edit menu to the profile manager. I would export your profile, and then you could just simply import that. That would be your key commands, macros, and like other, your global workspaces, preferences. So if you're going to be backing up different aspects, you could utilize that. Also, the key commands, if you go to, depending on your operating system, like on the Mac, if you go to the application data folder on Windows, you can do that. If you want to just come over here and go to library, and then if you go to preferences to presets, here you'll see key commands, and all of your key commands that you make will be just stored right there. And to do that on Windows, we could just come over here, and I'll just show you on find the so on the Windows platform, you could go to your start menu and then go to all programs, and then you'll see user settings data folder, and that's where it's going to be. So you could just store it as a particular preset right there, and then so you can back it up like that. But I think if you back up your profile of all your settings, that's a great way to do it. So. All right, so we're seeing Vincent, this came up a couple weeks ago. It says I did about how he wasn't able to hit the solo key, have the S key solo the selected track until he opened up the editor window and then clicked on it, and then the solo key worked. So I haven't found a solution for that, and I'm getting together with some of the guys from Steinberg next week at the NAMM show and see if they have any ideas for that. But it seems to be working. I know you and Nick both ran into the issue, but I tried it on like 4 different computers, and it behaved kind of as expected for me. But I'll continue to see if I get more information. It's on my list to discuss next week when I'm in person with some of my colleagues from Steinberg. See, Mark Rabin is very grateful for Jan's Cubase index site. All right, so we see from Mickey's Productions. Hey, Greg, when I recorded my accordion, it sounds like artifacts when I changed the tempo. I've tried the different algorithms, but still... So, when you're doing tempo changes, it's going to use the, some of the algorithms for stretching. So let's say if we want it to come over, depending on how much you're stretching, the audio there's always going to be a chance of, different elements not working on different instruments if you're doing extreme amounts of time stretching. So, generally the industry standard algorithm for just about all of the DAWs will be the elastic time and pro. But, if you're trying to go from 180 beats a minute to 45 beats a minute, something, an extreme change, you may run into kind of issues with that. And if that's the case, you may be better approaching it from an offline perspective. So if you know what tempo you want to take the sample to, you can select it, go to the audio menu, and we could go to processes, and you could go to time stretch. So we'll say, okay, we'll select your time stretch, and now we could set different, there's different kind of algorithms in here, but we could do it offline. And when it's going offline, it's not doing it in real time. It could change the quality. So maybe if you do an offline time stretch here and see if that helps with it, because then the computer is not doing it in real time, but it's, able to process it offline as well. All right, so Georgina says, when I connect my Akai MK3 MIDI controller, Cubase recognizes it, but it doesn't grant me access to manipulate its buttons. Should I create a new one? So if it's, when you're doing the MIDI remote, like my Korg Nano control is automatically recognized. So let's say if I come over here to my Focus Quick controls, this is, automatically recognized. Now to change the settings, what you may have to do is, let's go to our mapping assistant. So it may be kind of fixed for particular settings. So if it's one that's kind of automatically recognized, we can come over and let's say our mapping page, and we could access it from up here as well. And the first thing you want to do, if you see like different factory settings, is we could click on the plus sign, and then if you wanted to customize it, we'll just call this Georgina and hit OK. And now we have kind of the outline of all of the particular instruments here. All of the buttons, all the parameters of your controller. And now we could hit the button and assign your different functions from the mapping assistant, or we could just say, I want this button to control this button. So I could, right click on a particular button here and, say, okay, pick up for MIDI remote mapping. So I want this button. I'll say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. I hit the button here and then apply the mapping, and now this button is doing that particular function. So if you see kind of the shell of it and it's not allowing you to change it, you should be able to overwrite the settings, but go to the mapping page and then just create a new mapping page, because you could have one controller, but you could have presets for hundreds of different functions as different, like almost like a preset for what those controls are actually controlling. So give that a try. All right, let me just see if Gareth found the little swap button in Groove Agent. Let me just take a look. He described the icon to me. right, so I'm going to... So it doesn't look like that's swapping the left and right channels there. I think that's snap. Let me just move the cursor here. Let me just... Yeah, so... So I think it says snap and not swap. So... See Gareth and says he wishes he could shout to me on the live stream. So you can, I may not hear it. So all right, Monica Bellucci asks, hi Greg, how do I permanently delete the script from my controller in Midi Remote so its name no longer appears in the list? All right, so let's come to our Midi Remote here. So let's say I want to get rid of okay, so I think if we go to settings, so let's say I want to get rid of this, like my Nectar P4. I will, I think as we come here, we can select the script. So click on the scripts tab, and then you'll see just this little delete script function right here. So click on kind of this page, you'll see the settings, like the Open MIDI Device Manager, go to scripts, select the script you want to get rid of. So it's how I get rid of this. And do you want to delete the script, say delete, and then it'll be gone. All right, so we just ask for a brief, we see from question, brief explanation of the Cubase Clipper, please, thanks. So we could think of this as a way of kind of getting additional gain by doing kind of like a soft clip. So let's just find... So this is kind of a different way to kind of get a kind of a subtle distortion on your project. So let's say we have something, I'll just do something a little cleaner sounding. Bear with me. All right, so just get to my mixer. I'm going to put this on master. So we'll open up the soft clipper here so we could adjust kind of. And then we could kind of work with the second and third order harmonics. Could have a blend knob. So it's a way to kind of get more gain and control over kind of the second and third order harmonics as well. You could boost independently. All right, so we see from Marcello or Marcello, hi, Mr. Greg, I have a Steinberg UR242 audio interface with only 2 physical outputs. I want to route the sound from Media Bay to an output other than its main master using the Qmix system. So I think, the UR242, which is what I'm using, actually has 4 outputs on it. So if you go here to let's say the control room. And I wanted to create a Qmix. So we'll add a Q. So say, okay, I want to send this to the vocalist. And I know there's kind of like the little knob. So say we want to go to our vocal. And then at this point we'll say we want, so I have like my main outputs, but there's also the output 2 left, output 2 right that we could use for routing. So I could have my monitor here and the monitor and the outputs there, the secondary outputs configured for Qmix. All right, you see Drino Corleone just says, Greg, Happy New Year to you as well. All right, so we see Pylon Records. Hi, Greg, how can I get the transport bar to show both bars and beats in seconds time simultaneously? I don't want to keep switching. I believe this was standard in older Cubase. So when we want to come over here to, we can see our timeline. You'll see 3 little dots here. So you can see kind of our master time is set to bars and beats. And if I extend this over to the right, just these 3 dots, hold the left mouse button down and extend those 3 dots to the right of, and you'll see your secondary time display. So now as we navigate, we can see bars and beats and seconds. So you just come right over there and you can see both. So they try to kind of have some control so that you don't need a monitor that's 84 inches wide, but you can just pick and choose exactly what components you want to expand, just like we can do on the main transport. So we can just navigate like so. So just come to the right of your master time. And if you always want to swap those, a lot of people don't know this, you could just use the period on your computer keyboard, like just above and to the right of the space bar. You could exchange your time formats between secondary and primary display quickly. And thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we see from Achilles, why when I load tracks from other project, the linked tracks I saved doesn't open as I saved it, name, record, only check. So it could be, some parameters, like you could import the media, but we'll do a quick test on it, but some projects are going to be, some parameters may only be in the particular project and may not be stored with the media. So importing files may import the media with all of its settings, but maybe not all the edits and edit settings. But we'll do a quick test. and see, but that could be something that's kind of at the project level. So let's say okay, so let's say I have these, and I'm going to link these. Okay, so now in my project, these will all be linked. I'll overwrite the link by holding down my Control or Command key. So now we do this. I'm going to save. All right, so we'll call this link test. Okay, so I want to do a new project, and we'll import tracks from our link test project that we just saved. So here, if it's the link that you're talking about, that looks like that was preserved. But let me just reread. So, but it looks like the linked status of those tracks was preserved in the import tracks. See, Mark Rabin says that he will do thumb flanging for $50. You don't want to devalue it, Mark. Just kidding. All right, so we just see a question. Used to be able to push control and solo on a track and it would unsolo everything, but in 13 it does nothing, and when zoomed into a track the playhead stutters back and forth. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and since these are linked, I'll take out that. I'll just remove those. And let me add a number of audio tracks. We'll try it. All right, so I have a number of tracks soloed here randomly. Okay, so I'm going to hold down Control or Command, and I want to solo this one. And we can see that overrode the solo on the other tracks. So again, when I come here, we'll just randomly solo track. So I have that. So if I solo track, that gets added, but if I hold down Control or Command, the other tracks are immediately unsoloed. So it seems to be working for me as expected. Let me know if I'm doing it differently than you. Then we see, all right, when zoomed into a track, the playhead stutters back and forth. So depending on, it could be that we'll just give it a shot here. All right, so let's say I drag this file in. All right, so let's say so I'm zoomed in, let's say, probably near sample level here. So I'll zoom out, it's playing, we'll come here, zoom in. So there we're playing at the sample level, so I don't know if maybe, if you have, like if you're zoomed in, and let's say maybe if you selected just a small portion with like the range tool, maybe like just a tiny, tiny portion. Let me just turn my snap off here. And maybe so we'll have our cycle turned on. So maybe you have cycle turned on, and there's a preference for that the range will follow the cycle selection, but if you have just a tiny bit there, maybe it's kind of correlation that the cycle marker is set and it's just playing in that cycle over and over again, but it seems like it's playing fine at the sample level resolution for me. All right, so we have a question from Michael. How can we reduce RAM memory consumption when we have too many VST instruments? And how much do we actually need? So, depending on how much memory, like the type of instruments can have a big impact on this. So if you're using lots of orchestral instruments, you could utilize more memory, but a lot of instruments, as we go to work with them, can have scaling of how much is being streamed from the hard disk versus how much is being streamed directly from the from memory. So we'll come over here, let's add an instrument track. We'll do, let's say, Groove Agent, and when we go to Groove Agent and we go to options here, you can set how much of the balance is coming from the disk versus RAM. When we go to virtual instruments such as Halion or Halion Sonic, we would have the setting in kind of the similar area. So as we go to add that, we would see under options, again, how much of the balance is between, we could go into an expert mode, but how much is being utilized for, streaming versus the hard disk. So it could be that, it could be your hard disk may need, you may want to load more into RAM so that it could load up faster. You may want to load less of the samples into RAM as well. So, so you can adjust it there. Some instruments will not handle memory consumption well. A lot of drum instruments will load every drum sample into RAM, whether you're utilizing it or not. So at that point, like the instrument will always work. Some instruments, like we go to Halion and to Groove Agent, you could actually, in Groove Agent, it has functions where you could just say, I want to do just a RAM save, and it will do an analysis of what samples aren't being used in the project and unload all of those samples from memory. So different instruments will handle memory consumption differently. So it could really depend on what instruments you're using. A lot of people, most composers I know will, they're doing like lots of orchestral stuff, will have 128 gigs of RAM. My machine that I have now that you're watching, my MacBook, has 64 gigs of RAM. My studio PC has 128 gigs of RAM. And, I don't have any problems with either. I don't do tons of heavy orchestral stuff utilizing my work computer, but I think it could handle quite a bit. But again, each instrument could respond to memory management differently. All right, so we see from Perzit7, do you know Dr. Toshifumo Kunimoto, the renowned developer of the Yamaha VO1? So I have met Dr. K. a number of times. I believe he's retired now from Yamaha, but it's just a really, very humble, just a really genius engineer, software engineer. He's the only, he did the only recreations of the Rupert Neve plugins that were actually authorized by Rupert Neve. So if you get like the Steinberg Portico series, those are the only ones. So, but yeah, I have been fortunate enough to meet him at trade shows and got to hang out with him in Japan once. All right. See, Michael Team says can't figure out how to get to NAMM this year, maybe next year. So, see, Mark Rabin just saying Google Maps. Yeah, take the 10 to the 5, and then just turn left at Disney. So, all right. So we have a question from Bling Bling about. My chat field just jumped. Okay, so Bling Bling's question is, how do I transform a CC1 to CC11 using the input transformer? Okay, so let's say I will go to an instrument or MIDI track, and just to show you what's being transmitted, I'm going to open up the MIDI monitor. Okay, so we see now that as I move my modulation wheel, we're seeing MIDI CC1. So I want to turn that MIDI CC1 into MIDI CC11. We'll go to the input transformer, and on Cubase 13 it looks like this, and we're going to go to the track level, and I want to open the panel. So we're going to activate, we could have 4 different modules. We want to choose transform. We're going to take our type is equal to controller, and then so we're going to take our controller, and we could just say we want to do our subtype of our controller. I only wanted to do modulation. So we're going to take our modulation controls, because I don't want to change all the controllers. I just want to change modulation. So we're going to take our CC1 data, and then we're going to say we want to take the type, and we're going to, we'll say subtype, and we're going to add 10, because we're going from CC1 to CC11. The difference is 10. So what we're going to do is now, as I move this, my modulation wheel is transmitting MIDI CC1. I turn this off, deactivate it. We're on CC1, turn it on, and now we are at CC11. So again, transform. You want to say type is equal to controller. You want to do the subtype is going to be equal to modulation CC1, and then we want to go to the subtype here, and we're going to add 10, and then that will transform your MIDI CC1 to CC11. All right, so we see a question. How can I transpose an acoustic guitar loop to a lower key using the new algorithms in the sampler track in Halion 7 to maintain better sound integrity compared to the elastic algorithm? Okay. So what we need to do is to drag it into the sampler track, and then we could transpose it using the keys on the sampler track. So I'm going to go to my sampler control, and we're going to take this audio file. So when I play C3, this is going to be the original pitch. So what we want to do is to enable audio warp. So we'll come over here turn this on, and then we could go to our spectral HD algorithm. And now all you'd have to do is and then if I wanted to do pitch bend on top of it to get maybe somewhere in between, we could employ pitch bend as well. We'll modulate down at minor third. And then back to the original pitch. So what you'd have to do is then record directly from this sampler track that's been added. So we could come here. I will solo this track. So, and now that will trigger it. And if I wanted to just do a render in place to turn it back into audio, we could just come right there. And now you have the audio file of that. So drag it into the sampler track, activate the audio warp, and then you could use the spectral algorithms here, which sound really fantastic. All right, so we see a question. Is there a shortcut to close any window in Cubase? So I think if we go to the windows, you could choose close all right here. And you could hide plugin windows independently. And I think that like as we open up a window here, so a lot of them, so let's say if we want to say close window, you know, so we could close all the windows. So I'll just cancel that. But some windows will be, you know, can be set up, you know, more dynamically than others. So just be aware of that. Some windows, you know, like if you hit the mixer, you could open and close the mixer accordingly as well. So. All right, so we see question, anyone know how to import the arranger track? So let's give it a shot here. I'm not sure if it's in the tracks from projects, but let's come over to the arranger. Maybe I'm not sure if it shows up. Yeah, I think what you can do, well, it's not importable if we have an arranger track. So let's come over here to arranger. And I have, let's just open project here. And we will just say, no, we won't activate it. But I think if I select all of the arranger events here and copy, and we come here that we could paste. So you can copy and paste arranger tracks, but they're not importable. So I'll mention that as another thing. All right, so you see bling bling. How do I create a shortcut to vertically zoom in on a selected track? All right, so if you wanted to make like the selected track larger, what you could do is if you go to the edit menu to enlarge selected track. So now I select a different track, that track will become enlarged just like that. So now I can say, oh, I just want to pop here. Let's go here. So go to your edit menu and just select enlarge selected track. And if you want it larger, you could just make it larger. So when you go to a different one, that size will be retained. All right, so we see question from Perzit70. Is there a macro to close Cubase without having to save or close the session? I don't think so, and I think it's kind of a fail-safe way as well. So if I have just one session open, I guess I could close it, and if I didn't make any changes, that it would, if I closed the particular project, if I closed a project, that it would close. If you made changes, it will prompt you to, if you want to save those changes, which I think is a good thing because a lot of people may close the project inadvertently without realizing that there's changes that weren't saved. So, but there isn't necessarily a macro to do that. All right. So we see, how do I navigate between markers using the left and right buttons in my keyboard? Okay, so let's say we have a number of markers here. And so I have different cycle markers laid out for me. So I think if you hit like Shift N, or if you just come over here where your marker is, you could hit B to go back, or N to go to the next marker. So, and that will take you to navigate to the markers. So if you wanted to assign that to like a Midi Remote, so we'll just come over here. So I'll just check kind of the key commands, and I think it's under like navigate next. Okay, locate next event. So once the marker track is selected, let's go to my Midi Remote. So I'll say next event. And I'll set this key to previous event. So now I could go to the next event or back to the previous marker using my key command. All right. All right, so we see which key is used to navigate vertically within the tracks. So I'm not sure if you want it to just, using like the mouse scroll wheel, or if you are just using the down key, you can navigate vertically like so. So if you want a keyboard command or just using the mouse scroll wheel, you could do that as well. So I'll just turn off this preference. All right, so just see Jazz Dude's wondering about if it's okay to ban these bots. So let's just see if, sometimes there may be people that kind of pop in and out. If they're just kind of asking, we'll watch their behavior if there's anything in the future. But if, sometimes people may pop in and out for, a couple minutes at a time. So if they don't respond to a link, they may just, checked in for a couple minutes. So maybe we'll see, I don't mind. We'll see if they have any suspicious behavior in the future, like if they ask kind of weird questions. So maybe we'll try that. All right, so you just see Home Studio World says, "Hi Greg, I have some confusion about the click signal flow because sometimes I need to hear it on screen record. Thanks." So the click is going to be going, if you're using the control room, it's going out through the control room, just the same way as if it was utilizing, if it was going out of without the control room. So, I think it's going out of the same, main monitoring path. All right, Marcello asks, how many developers or programmers work at Steinberg for Cubase? I think there's about like 200 employees, but you get a sense if you go to about Cubase Pro, these are all the people that, bring Cubase to you. So it's a wonderful team. One day I'll be able to get my name on there from you, if I do something really cool. But I'm not a developer, but these are the very smart people that have done the work to bring you the magic of Cubase right here. It's just, and I'm sure there's lots of people that don't make this list that do a lot of work behind the scenes as well. So it's a very dedicated group of people who do wonderful work. I'm proud to represent them. All right, wonderful Z Gerald Elion. All right, so we see Daja says, I recently received a user survey request from Steinberg in the comments. I wrote how extremely helpful your live streams are, and it sets Cubase apart from the competition. Well, thank you for the kind words. Yeah, so you see from Vincent, says regarding the solo issues, is factory restored everything and the issue is still lingering, so perhaps it's a compatibility bug. My setup is a Mac Studio M1 Max, Mac OS 12.5. So I'm running an M1 as well. So I think I'm on Ventura or Monterey, so I'm on 12.5 as well. So all right. Going through comments. See, there's more suspicion of bots. All right, so we see, and this is directed toward jazz. Why does Germany excel in audio software development sector? Truly dominating the markets with like Cubase, Ableton, Bitwig, Contact, Melodyne, Yuki, Sugar Bytes, VSL, and more. So, you know, a lot of, you know, I think that, you know, Steinberg really was probably, you know, one of the pioneering German software houses. So there's, you know, and I think that there's, you know, a certain mentality, and, you know, people have kind of grown up with it culturally. But yeah, it is interesting, you know, all the wonderful software solutions from Germany. But they make great cars, great lenses, a lot of good stuff in Germany. So, and the bread is really good as well. So. All right, I know I have a couple of, time is getting away from us. I had a couple of questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those before we run out of time. Okay, so we had this from Mark Rabin from the last live stream, and I had my brain cramp memory. So and his question was how to use jam mode on Groove Agent Full. Okay, so we'll do new project. So, and this is a function that's only in the full version of Groove Agent, not the SE. So let's take a look at, and if you guys haven't heard, there's a new vintage Simon Phillips kit. It was just released yesterday, so it's good. We'll use that as our example here. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to the examples, it's worth doing. So this is Simon's kind of classic Ludwig kit. All right, so let's start off with a pattern. So let's say I have like an introduction here. So I will come over and we'll start our transport. All right, now let's say when I come here, I want to just kind of set up quick, easy ways to navigate between a start, my pattern, a fill, and maybe I don't want this fill to, just change the tempo here. And to go back and forth, and then I want this to end, but I don't want to always have to navigate to a different pattern. So this is what jam mode can allow us to do. So all right, so when I come here, let's activate our jam mode. Now, once we do this, you see this little setting here. This is what I was forgetting. It's kind of subtle. All right, now once we activate jam mode, you'll notice that the icons here will change. So we're going to activate jam mode, and we see that we have like little arrows to the right. This indicates that after it does the introduction, it's going to go to another pattern automatically. And when we do a fill, we trigger a fill. After the fill, it will go back to one of these patterns, and as we go to a pattern that's an ending pattern, when we click this, instead of it repeating the ending over and over and over again, it will stop playing. So this is an easier way to just kind of click once or twice, a few times on the particular patterns, and have it kind of continuously play. So as we look at it, we can say, when we do this, we could have these patterns kind of just do one shots. So if I play this, it'll play this pattern and stop when it gets to the end of the pattern. So, we could, so if I switch this to one shot here, this time it will, I believe, end when we get to the particular pattern. Now, or we could have that toggle or continue to hold. So we could set these for each particular pad. So when we click on a pad, we could choose whether it's going to be kind of a standard, whether we want it to be an intro that will go next into a selected standard, a return, which we could think of a fill, and a stop, we could think of it as an ending. So if I want to start with an introduction, it will immediately go to like the next pattern. So let's say I now hit a fill. Now that I hit the fill, so once it does the fill, it'll immediately go back to the next pattern that I select here. So it's going to finish that fill and immediately start this particular pattern. And now when I hit one that's going to be a stop, now the jam is over. So jam mode will allow us to pick whether we have intros, fills, stops, and we can just come over and basically navigate between all these without having to always, hold a MIDI note to do it. It allows us to have a quick foundation of just kind of clicking a pad, and that pattern will play, and it will logically go from when the introduction is done. It's not going to repeat the introduction over and over and over and over again. It will immediately play the intro pattern, go to a main pattern, go from a main pattern. We click on a fill, it will do the fill and go back to the previously selected main. So at that point, you could just see how that's a little more conducive for kind of creative workflows and performances as well. So that's what jam mode allows you to do. All right, we had a question, how to automate widening a mix. So I misunderstood this from last live stream. So there's a couple ways to approach this. So let's say we will jump back to this project. All right, and we'll just open up this editor. So I'm going to go to my stereo combined panner. So let's say we listen to our mix here, and let's say as we go into a different part of the song, maybe we want to automate the mix sounding wider. So let's say as we go into the verse, I'm going to go to my panner here, and once we're in our combined panner, I could say we want this to be, so let's say as we go into this chord change, so let me just, so I could come here and say, okay, I want this to be narrower. So say I want to automate this getting wider. And let's say I want it to be narrower sounding now in the verse. And wider again. Now another method to do this could be to use an imager plugin. And I'll put this on, let's say, one band. So we say we want it to be very kind of narrow. We could automate this plugin. And as we come out of the piano solo, so if we want to listen to that again, you just rewind and we can see the automation going on, have the mix sound narrower. So those are a couple of good techniques to kind of automate your mix sounding wider. All right. All right. So we had a question. It says I've successfully connected my DAW and my Complete Control MK Mark II 61 MIDI controller. Can or do I need to add it as a MIDI control surface? And while at the keyboard, can I somehow move through marker to marker with the shuttle wheel? Is this a native instrument question? So, with the shuttle wheel, if you wanted to do it, so often the shuttle wheel, can just be kind of set to navigate. So let's say if I want, I don't have kind of a wheel here. So, sometimes shuttle wheels can transmit different values for going, if you move the shuttle wheel to the right, it could transmit one MIDI CC message or a key command, or if you move it to the left, it could transmit a different MIDI message. So a lot of times if you're doing markers, I'm sure we probably have a marker track here. All right, so if we, and again, as we saw before, if we want to navigate to the different markers, let me just make sure I have the MIDI remote. This, jump back here. You could program buttons on your MIDI remote. So once you have kind of a MIDI remote object set up, that will allow you to navigate between the different markers just using the MIDI remote. So, I'm not sure if the jog wheel is transmitting different CC messages. You need to have this for different messages kind of going, one direction and the other direction. Some will just have that do like keyboard shortcuts that you could program. So you might have to check with native instruments to see what information. And you could, one of the things that you could do is, if you add a MIDI track, or you have an instrument track, just say we go here, just go to the MIDI monitor plugin. And when you go to the MIDI monitor plugin, see what happens when you move. And if it's transmitting MIDI information, you could see if it's transmitting different information when you move the jog wheel one way and different information when you're programming it a different way. But it's really easy to kind of set up, just buttons to go to next and previous marker on your MIDI controller as well. Anything that's doing MIDI messages, you could configure using the MIDI remote. All right, and we also had, so there's a question I've seen through your various videos. You go to a drop-down menu, not sure what it was for because sometimes you go fast. I saw a mention to Silvestri automation and chords. Is that, are they custom for you, and are they on my Nuendo 13? And so I think when I go to my macros, I may have like an Alan Silvestri macro that so a Silvestri automation macro. So I think I created a macro for him and I just did it on this computer and it's just kind of stayed there. So it's nothing that's standard with Cubase. I think it was something very much for his workflow. And he's, such an incredibly nice gentleman. I mean, just like every time I speak with Alan, it's just like so impressive and such a positive force. It's really inspiring to be able to work with him at all. So. All right, question. Is there another way other than MIDI sends to connect one MIDI channel to multiple VST instruments or rack instruments? I want one MIDI channel to connect to about 6 instruments. It seems like a really simple thing, but it's one of those things that seems simple but can have a lot of consequences later. So if you want to do, multiple instrument tracks, let's say I'm here, I want to do a retro log. All right, so let's say I'll just right, and I will, let's say, duplicate this track, and I'll just create like a massive layer on it. Okay, I'll add some pad shops. So we'll just add a number of okay, so let's come and all right, so let's say now I have 5 instruments. Now it seems like it's a really interesting thing to just come over and when we are doing recording to say, okay, I want one instrument and it's going to be layered to all of these sounds. Now the problem can be like, so say, and I play one note, and it's being sent to 6 different sources, but this is also going to 6 different mix console channels as well. So while if we want this to be in one kind of destination, you know, the output is still going to be kind of spread across. So what I always recommend people to do is just to come over here and put these into a folder track. So I'm going to move it, and we'll call this like synth layer 1. And you could do this with however many tracks you want. You could close the folder track and record enable the folder track. And if you record, you know, just come over here and place Cubase into record. I think you might have to, you could see that as you record, all the tracks will be recorded simultaneously, and then you still have the option of rendering each independently, editing each independently. So if you're like, okay, I just want to come here and drop this down an octave, drop it up an octave. So I think that this, like when you go to actually render and deliver and export files, that this makes a lot more sense to approach it from utilizing folder tracks. And you could save the folder tracks, import and export those as track archives if needed. But that way you could have one track and you could have any number of tracks and still have all of their independent audio routing and effects processing. All right, let's jump back to the questions. All right. Okay, just reading through comments here. All right, says Dave just says, I bought a new hard drive for my VSTs. Is there an easy way to have my projects redirected to a new drive that has different drive letter than the original VST drive? Probably a contact question. Yeah, so each, if it's for like the instrument content, it's going to be up to like the individual instruments. Like, Steinberg has a library manager. So if I want to take all of my Hallian content, I could select multiple contents here, and then I could just click on move. And that will prompt me, where do I want to move all the samples so that Hallian or Groove Agent knows where to find them. And then you could just choose a new folder. So I'm sure that Contact has something similar. Okay. All right, so we see Graham Witcher on from Royal Wooten Bassett and just received his new UR44C interface as his Focusrite interface died, so he's loving his UR44C. All right, so CW asks how to automate project tempo in real time using MIDI CC knobs and faders. Is that even possible? Again, for orchestral music purposes. So there isn't there isn't a direct way of doing it, but if we have a tempo track, so we'll come over, add a tempo track, and let's open up like the tempo track. So I think it's Control T that there is. If you right click, you'll see tempo recording. And once you open this up, so it's, and this is, I'll grant you it's a bit crude, but if we come here, let's say we're playing and I open up the tempo editor, again, Control or Command plus the letter. So if I open this up, I can now just kind of come over here. It's not assignable from a MIDI CC. You can use your mouse scroll wheel to control it. So you can do it just kind of like that to control the parameters. I'll test it just with the Cubase 12 remote because we could use some of the knobs as kind of to mimic a mouse AI knob. So let me see if that works. So So say we use it as a mouse AI knob. We'll open this up. Yeah, it doesn't work with that, but you can use your mouse scroll wheel to do that. So while it's not a MIDI CC, you can do, something similar. And again, it's not the most sophisticated algorithm, but you can do it in a pinch. All right, so we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I see we have some more questions that were kind of emailed in. I'll try to respond to those. Again, the next live stream will be February 2nd, so 2 weeks from today, because I have the NAMM show. So I want everyone to stay, safe and healthy. If anyone is going to the NAMM show, please stop by and say hi. I'll be in the Yamaha booth, probably in the streaming section area, showing software and Yamaha streaming solutions. So if you are going to be at the NAMM show, please stop by, say hi. I'd love to meet you. And with that, I'm just grateful that everyone took time out of their day to learn a little bit more about their Steinberg products. And we will be back, and we should have a full month in February. So look forward to that, and we'll get the live streams going again on February 2nd. Everyone, again, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll check in about 2 weeks from today. Thank you very much. Goodbye.